All right, David.
Right.
In part one there,
Right.
Liam seemed like quite a nice fella, but
Oh, he was a great guy.
but
He's
Dino, how do you pronounce his surname?
well, Dino Cellini.
Cellini.
Yeah, Liam he used to occasionally take me to the Victoria Sporting Club in Edgware Road, where he liked to play the tables, which didn't really interest me, but the food there was good. And he used to take me to the to a gambling club in, oh, what's it called? It was Nightingale's in Nightingale Square. I can't remember the name of the club. It'll come to me. But when we got there, this was a Class 1 gaming club where a lot of American people, it was run by some Americans with a British host or British manager. And it was a top class club. And he used to take me in there and he introduced me to the gaming manager, Dino Cellini. Now, in that club, we used to have quite a lot of people like the Egyptian film star that used to play the cards and play bridge,
Omar Sharif.
Omar Sharif, and quite a few film stars came down, Nancy Sinatra and Cicely Courtnidge, and quite a few people that were, and the doorman was a guy called George Raft, who was a big B movie star from America who used to play the gangster roles, but he was a dancer as well. He was a smooth guy. And I used to go into there and walk around with Liam and watch him play, and then we'd have a meal. And he introduced me to Dino Cellini. Well, we were sitting having a meal, and Dino joined us, and it was quite obvious he didn't understand he knew the mathematics of the business by sense, by probably by repeatedly having sort of played the games. And he I got down and sat down with him and taught him some very basic simple probability and how his games worked, you see, and then we could work. He knew that they always made a profit, but he couldn't work out quite how. Anyway, I got very friendly with the guy, and he said, if I can give, instead of giving 1.5 6 to 4 for a blackjack, if I can give 2 to 1 and beat all my competitors, will I make money? So that was a little task he sort of set me, which I said I'll try it out on the computer we had at Brunel. And funnily enough, one of the research students was actually dealing cards at night to pay his way. Not at this club, but anyway, I arranged to meet up with Dino after Easter at the club, and we'd talk about the results of playing 40,000 games of blackjack and paying 2 for 1 instead of 1.5 to 1, and it didn't come out with a profit, so it had all been set up by people who knew, obviously. But I arranged to meet him on Easter Tuesday at the club, and it was over Easter whatever it does hits the fan, and George Raft is refused entry back into the country from America, and Dino Cellini disappears from the scene to the Carlton Towers, and the American side of things suddenly evaporates. And the English guy said, "Oh, I'm going to have to go to Vegas with this lot if I want to keep my job." But the police, the CID, had noted that there were some meetings being held at this club, the Colony Club it was called, and the participants there all seem to have mafia connections, and Dino Cellini had mentioned to me that if I could solve this problem, he'd send me on a holiday to the Bahamas, to their hotels, which I found out were run by Jake and Moya Lansky, the heads of the mafia in America, but from Bahamas. But so the whole thing collapsed, and the next thing I heard about Dino Cellini was he was running a similar joint somewhere down in Tasmania.
No, he wasn't the only American connection, was he? Because you were a tipster to none other than Bob Hope.
Oh yes, well, yeah, that was not connected with the Colony Club at all. That was a pal of mine from university, Barry Gill, set up his own. He was a correspondent for the Daily Herald, motoring correspondent, and he went to work for the Formula One circuit, the Marlborough, that they're sponsoring Formula One races and cars, and he went to work for them and set up his own little company after that, and he was promoting the Littlewoods Milk Cup for football, and a lot of publicity for the motor racing circuit particularly. And he was doing things for Avis, the car hire group, and he decided that they'd have a day at Sandown Park when all Avis clients, or not all, the main ones in Britain, would be invited to Sandown Park for a day's racing. They'd fly into Heathrow, we'd meet up for coffee and biscuits at Heathrow, and then there would be about 120 cars, and all the different range that Avis had were in the car park with instructions of how to get to Sandown Park, and these people in pairs had to go and drive these cars to Sandown Park, where I was waiting for them to give them the talk about the racing, and they'd have lunch. Well, just before lunch, there was a sort of bit of a gasp, and Barry had said something special will happen. Well, in walked Barry with Bob Hope and his wife, and who happened to be in England for 2 weeks on his way back from entertaining the troops in where out in the Far East, in where were they fighting?
Vietnam or Korea?
Yeah, Vietnam. I think it was Vietnam, and he had one of these busty blondes with him as well. His wife came as well. So, and we had people like Alan Minter, the middleweight champion, and Sterling Moss, and one or two other C-list film stars and things. And so there we were for lunch, and I was having to give the talk of the racing. It was a jumps racing, and I'd picked that day for Barry because I knew the Queen Mother would be there, because it was her Royal Artillery Day at Sandown Park. And I thought it would be, we thought it would be a good idea if Bob Hope met the Queen Mother. Well, it so happened that he was her favourite comedian, and his lifetime ambition had been to meet the Queen's mother. So the Queen Mother, and it was like high noon, as there were two groups of people across the paddock at Sandown Park. Queen Mother with her itinerary, the chairman of Avis, and Bob Hope and Barry and his team, and she invited his wife and himself up to their box for afternoon tea, and I'd given him some tips, and he'd given me about 300 or 400 quid And so I put 200 on the first race where I think Johnny Frankham was riding, and I think I was 7-2 or something like that, and it won. And then there was 10 up, the Fulk Walwyn's, I think it won the Gold Cup eventually, but that won one of the big races. And I backed another horse at 5-2, which hampered the second horse at the last hurdle, and I knew it would get disqualified. So I rushed off, and I'd got about 400 quid from various places on this horse on the rails, mainly with Victor Chandler and Ladbrokes. And I hedged. I got 6-4. The horse would have finished second, so I made it so that we either won and I lost a couple of hundred hedging, or we won about 50 quid, but we didn't lose on the main bet. And so it got thrown out, and we went back. We gathered back at the dining room, and I had to explain to Bob Hope what I'd done all afternoon, and he was all ears. And he said, "Gee, how do you make money on that? It was thrown out. It was stud down." So I had to explain how I was hedging the bet, and he just said to me, "Geez," he says, "you're the best goddamned horse player I've ever come across." He said, "I'm going to take you across to Santa Anita, and we're going to take that place apart." So he finished up with about 600 quid, and Alan Minter was quite drunk and hugging me and kissing me, and all the other, apart from Sterling Moss, who didn't believe a word I said, and he backed everything against me, and he was a real wet Monday, he was on after the racing. So Barry, who was, as I say, I've been at university with him. We were great mates. He, I think I can say it loudly now, but he slipped me 1,500 quid in 1984 for organising this day's work. He said, because we'll never get another publicity shot like Bob Hope meeting the Queen Mother. But originally, I'd also, this was with Liam Kavanagh, this was from the Colony Club, Bing Crosby was over and had visited the club, staying at one of the top hotels on which one was it now? I don't know whether it was Claridge's, I think. Anyway, we had to pick him up and take him to Windsor races one Monday afternoon, and this was Liam's idea, born at the Colony Club. So I went into London, and we jumped into a taxi, and Bing came out of Claridge's and with his little we drove down to Waterloo, took a first class seat on the train to Windsor, and went across on the riverboat, which Bing thought was absolutely marvellous to be, a way to go to the races. And we got there, and I fancied a horse, Black Sky, Walter Nightingale, Duncan Keith. It was about 7 or 8 to 1. So I said, we'll back this, and so he gave me a tenner each way for it. He obviously was a bit easy, not too flush with his money, but this one at 7 or 8 to 1, and giving him another horse. And then suddenly up popped Robert Morley and Wilfrid Hyde White at Windsor races. And of course, when Bing was there and those two got together, well, we'd lost him for the afternoon, and I just met him here and there, chatted to him here and there, but he was having so much fun with these two guys that Liam took him back to London. But he'd had a marvellous day, he'd said, and he'd never been to the races like that. And then I found out about Robert Morley, that he only used to come to Windsor and Ascot because he used to put his sons in the school, Papelwick, just down the opposite Ascot racecourse. used to send his children to Papplewick, and so that he could visit his children at school and go racing at the same time.